And of course, what's the main problem in Brazil? Well, it's corruption, and it's a society run particularly by an oligarchy that's largely rooted in the construction and real estate trade. Now, what does the Olympics bring? Massive expenditures in real estate and construction. And that has meant an explosion of corruption scandals that have gone along with the Olympics as well. And there's obviously more to say about what's been exacerbated in Rio by these games. But I think the word predatory, I believe that's the word you used. I think that's predatory. I think that's the right word in this case, because the predations of the International Olympic Committee, the demands of the International Olympic Committee are always what wins in the end. So there were dreams by Brazil when the economy was sky high and they won these games that the Olympics would be used to create development that would reduce economic inequality. The opposite has been the case. And one of the reasons why that is that the country's been in economic crisis, and yet the IOC, like Ray Liotta and Goodfellas, they always have to get paid.
Let's go back to that, because the psychology behind what was happening in Brazil, based on I guess the overconfidence that, like, right, the oil prices were being what they were, was going to last forever. And this idea, like, this is our opportunity, because from what I've read, there is a sense of, there's a little bit of a sense of an insecurity that Brazil is not in the, is part of the, I guess, BRIC, right? I mean, is not quite there yet. And that this was, by having these two world-class sporting events, I guess, would propel them into another stratosphere. And I don't know, it sort of feels like there's so many analogies that come to mind when you think about, small businesses that overextend themselves, or
Icarus.
Yeah, I mean, it goes on and on.
That's the case here. You go back, the thing about it, though, going back, is that one can understand why they had that irrational exuberance, because the entire world had that irrational exuberance. Some of this is about understanding the disaster that was the Bush administration in the 2000s in the United States, spending several $1 trillion on a war in Iraq. I mean, one of the things that meant was that international commodities investors in the 2000s literally just parked their money in the Brazilian stock market. And when you couple that with the discoveries of oil and the commodities boom, and being a major exporter to China, which was having its own absolutely, volcanic economic growth, it meant that Brazil was like, this is our moment. And this kind of rhetoric was used all the time about how this is going to catapult us into the first League of Nations. This could even, get us a spot on the UN Security Council. And what's so crazy looking back on it is you see all of this excitement, and the one word that you never really see is sports. So right. It's never about sports. It was about patriotism. It was about power. It was about prestige, but not sports. And I think that's when you get in a lot of trouble, because that's what the games have become. They've become a form of development. They've become a form of a much deeper form of propaganda, and costlier form of propaganda, really, than they've been in the past. And they've reached this point where all you're really getting out of it is debt displacement and the militarization of public space.
That's fascinating. And I think at the time, like, Lula said something to the effect of, like, God is Brazilian. I mean, it was that big of a deal. I mean, when you describe the games like that, Godwin's law excused for a moment, but I immediately have a sense of, like, what the 36 games meant to Hitler. And, forgive me, but that's what that was, right? And was there did that maintain, or has that come back in sort of a more sort of commodified way? I mean, in some way, like, the games have become like everything else, it seems to me, in society, where it's completely commodified and financialized in many respects.
Yeah. Like, have you ever been in a position where there's an actual real life Nazi like David Duke, and you say, geez, look at that guy, he wants to be Hitler, and someone's like, duh, 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 Godwin's law, and you're like, well, wait a minute. Can I get an exception since he actually
We're
is a
talking about a
Nazi?
neo-Nazi, right?
Yeah, I mean, doesn't that like allow for an exception? I mean, I think when you talk about the Olympics, you need a massive exception of Godwin's law, because I don't think you can understand the modern Olympics without understanding the 36 Olympics in Berlin. And let's talk about why for a second. The 36 Olympics in Hitler's Germany, they were the first games ever that had the pageantry of the modern Olympics. Before that, the Olympics really was this kind of low-cost affair that was organized by aristocrats as a place to showcase the nobility of sport. I mean, it was very, very aristocratic in mindset. And that's not to say that winners weren't bathed with glory and that countries didn't find prestige, but it was a different kind of operation. 36 was the first Olympics where you had the people, the athletes actually march in a military style, representing themselves country by country. The 36 Olympics was the first one that had the running of the torch. All of this stuff was organized by Joseph Goebbels' department. And if you go back and track it, as historians have done, they particularly did their torch runs through the parts of Europe that Hitler went to conquer immediately into the late 1930s. So it's this very direct, think like Austria, Poland. I mean, this is where they went, and so that's 36. 1940, you have no Olympics because of World War II. 1944, you have no Olympics because of World War II. 1948, there's no more Germany. It's been split in two, and yet all of the pageantry that Goebbels thought of for the 36 games became a fastened part of the Olympics, not the least of which because the person who ran the Olympics, Avery Brundage, and then his successor, Juan Antonio Samaranch, were both dedicated fascists. Samaranch was a youth fighter for Franco in the 1930s, and he ran the Olympics through the 90s. Wow. So think about that for a second. I mean, so this isn't like Godwin's law stuff. This is like people said, fascism was really good at putting on these Olympics. Let's make sure we keep some of that stuff. But of course, when you want to put on a production like that, you also got to make sure that, like Mussolini, you make the trains run on time. And if everything has to run on time and be perfect, it means little things like dissent or somebody's homes. All of that is just collateral damage.
So there's a certain inevitability if you're going to involve yourself in an endeavor like that. I mean, there's two thoughts that come to mind. One is that at one point it seems to me. I mean, I just feel this as a kid, being, I guess, I don't know, 14. 13 when Mike Eruzione, and I don't know, for some reason it seemed very Boston to me when USA won the gold medal in the hockey, but it became sort of like this, I don't know, this outlet for the Cold War in some way, right? It was like and became very, very, I don't know, patriotic is the right word, but East versus West. It became obviously huge in those years of the Cold War.
And can I tell you real quick, Sam, if you go back and read the Sports Illustrated article, and their whole archives are online about the 1980 victory, they quote tons of people who directly reference the Vietnam War and say, I feel like it's okay now to be proud to be American again. The last time I saw people with flags, other people were spitting at them. We're trying to tear them out of their hands. Now we're all waving them proud to be part of America.
Interesting. Hello, you. I'm Sam Seder. Looking for smart progressive talk that is occasionally amusing? Well, subscribe to our YouTube feed. Subscribe to our podcast. Like us on Facebook. And just generally